When I say the word GrimDark, you're probably thinking of a couple of things. Blanchitsu's paintings is probably a great example of what you always think of, especially the most famous picture in Warhammer ever. And with this artwork, you can start to see the hopelessness, sad, violent nature of this style. And we take the idea of GrimDark and the models set in this GrimDark setting and paint them clean with highlights. But when I hear the term GrimDark, my head goes here. Today, I'm going to be showing you how I easily paint Dark Souls miniatures to look rotty and grimy and to fit in the aesthetic that they are from. You can use this on any miniatures you like, but today I'm going to be painting these ones because they were very kindly sent to me by Steamforged Games with their new game, Dark Souls, the board game, The Sunless City. You probably heard of Dark Souls, the board game. I played it a bunch on the channel like last year and also 7 years ago when it first came out. Think of this as kind of like Dark Souls 2.0. It's not really an expansion. It's a brand new core set that takes the old rules and kind of builds a second edition, essentially. But the way we're going to be painting them today, you can paint any miniature like it, and it's very, very easy. So let me show you how I do it. To prep the miniatures, we first need to base them, and all of the boards in this game are based in like Gothic cathedral tile section. So I'm stealing the tip I saw from Midwinter Minis where I'm using card to cut out little tile shapes and I'm just gluing them to the base. And then I'm sprinkling sand in the gaps to create like a mashed up tile situation that's fairly generic. And then we're just going to prime them black. Next up, we're going to paint them very, very quickly. Now, I'm using a method known as slap chop, but if you've never seen slap chop before, essentially what we're going to do, we're going to take like a medium gray, add it to our large brush, and then slap most of the paint off it. On like, I'm using a piece of MDF, but you can also use a piece of tissue. The reason for that is because we want a dry brush so we can add highlights to the miniature and catch all the edges without actually having to paint any of the edges. And we're going to cover most of the miniature in this light gray, and then we're going to add some white and then add some more white until we're just basically doing a white dry brush. And by doing that to all of the miniatures, what we essentially get is like pre-shading. It's like, I think it's Griseal shading it's technically called, but we're essentially pre-shading the miniatures where the top parts of the miniature are all white and the deepest recesses are all dark already. And that creates some natural shadows and it shows us where the highlights are supposed to be. All of the miniatures, the player characters and the enemies are mostly based on models of Dark Souls 3. So I'll be using those for color references. But again, if you're not painting Dark Souls in particular, this doesn't matter. You can follow the same steps. Once we've decided our color scheme, it's a case of using a transparent paint such as a contrast paint, army paint, or speed paint, Galeo Express colors, or whatever you want it. Whatever. Really thin paint will also work. And essentially all we're going to do is paint by numbers. And by that I mean we're just going to go, okay, there's some skin there. We're going to paint it the color we're going to use for our skin. Okay, there's some trouser there. We want to paint that a particular color. We're going to use a thin paint to paint that a different color. And essentially what you want to do is just quickly fill in the color. Paint by
numbers. It's very simple. I don't need to explain this concept.
Now I use transparent paints for pretty much all of it except for the metallics. I use traditional metallics for this. But all you need to make sure of is that you're being neat. If you like splodge the paint in the wrong place and then add another transparent color over it, you're going to be able to see that. So if you do smudge, make sure you like tidy up with a little bit of white or light gray paint over the bit you've missed, unless you're going over with like a solid paint like metallics, for example. Any mistakes you do make will show quite visibly. Now in this instance, I'm not really focusing too much on what particular color I'm using. I'm doing a lot of mixing because I'm using artwork as a reference, and then I'm trying to make my collection of paints fit what I'm trying to do. So I'm using a lot of mixing, and because it's Dark Souls, I can just mix everything with brown and that seems to work. But all you need to make sure really for this style of painting is that each part of the miniature that you are painting in a color is very different to the one next to it. You don't want to paint something like black and then gray next to it because it just won't stand out very well. Which is kind of why I went for a more green tone to the skin tones on the mimics and the hollows, purely because they're not really green, but I'm adding a little bit of separation by adding green to that flesh tone, so it kind of looks a bit different. And when we have our next step, all of those colors will be pulled together. And if it was all very similar colors, it would all look the same tone, and we don't want that. If you wanted to do anything else to the miniature, such as add transfers, or in this case, I'm doing some freehand, very badly, I should add, now is the time to do it once you're up to this point. The way we're going to be finishing off these miniatures is very forgiving for like this sort of style freehand, where I'm just kind of looking at the shape and just guessing and just sketching it out. I'm not really thinking about it too much. I can't do freehand. However, for these sorts of miniatures, if you are just giving the impression that there is something there, that will go a long way. And we're also going to dry brush the base with a little bit of ivory. Now's a good time to do it because we're going to be able to pull all the miniature together with our secret ingredient. And before I tell you the secret ingredient, if you really want to, you could leave your miniatures here. They don't really look grimdark, but if you are just painting miniatures fast, then this is how most people paint them these days, and they do look all right. You've got the different colors, you've got the separation, and they'll look good on the tabletop. Just for me, they look a bit bright. Now these are all painted up, it's time for the secret ingredient.
The secret ingredient is
grime.
Now, due to the nature of this, I would recommend varnishing your miniatures first. You don't have to, but I have had accidents where the streaking grime has dried too much and I've not been able to get it off and I've had to strip the model and start again. It's better than nothing. It literally takes 5 minutes. So whilst I'm waiting for the varnish to dry, I'm going to sit down, relax, and play some Warhammer 40,000 Dakka Squadron. This is a dynamic aerial shooter full of action and explosions where you take the role of an aircraft pilot that is now available on the Nintendo Switch. Take control of a powerful orc aircraft and engage in the most intense air flights across various war-torn landscapes. Fly through 5 unique planets in the campaign mode and complete tasks as a commander. Orc commander! The missions provide diverse objectives such as defense or sabotage. Enjoy the explosions of the scenery while defeating enemy bases. You can use barrel rolls, boosts, or air brakes to destroy the targets more precisely, and join one of the 5 available orc clans, where you can gain bonuses to stay tactical, attack swiftly or unpredictably, just like Gorka Mork intended. You can customize your plane with a variety of weapons and upgrades that can be used on the battlefield to gain an advantage over your opponent. Unlock new ships and choose your favorite loadout for sowing destruction, whether it's against a measly Imperial Crafter or the Necron Monolith. You know me, I love portable gaming, and now this game's finally available on the Nintendo Switch. Use the link down in the description to grab this on the Nintendo eShop, but otherwise I'll see you in the skies. But streaking grime is an enamel wash. What basically this means is, it's like a pre-mixed oil wash. So what we can do is we can paint it all over the miniature, let it sit for about like 30 minutes or so and let it start to dry. And then you might think the model is ruined. We can actually remove the wash using odorless thinners and makeup sponges. Now you don't have to use makeup sponges. A lot of people use cotton swabs. A lot of people use like rags, like microfiber cloth or something. I like makeup sponges because they're small, you can tear them, but they're also designed for blending, so you can blend your paint with them. And the great thing about streaking grime, you can use this reductive process where we reactivate the grime and remove it rather than having to be careful, seeing it dry, it looks crap, and we're having to do it again. It's a very quick and easy way to create gradients over the colors we've just painted to make it go from the highest points are light and the dark points are dark, and that's kind of like what we're going for. And because we're using a makeup sponge, we can't get into the recesses to wipe the streaking grime away. So all of the recesses, all the shadows, all the dark bits, all the bits in between something else are all brown and grotty, and then everything else is kind of shiny, but now it has this brown tint, gross tint to it, which is just GrimDark in a bottle. As you're wiping it away, you might feel like you're just smearing the streaking grime. And at this point, just use a fresh sponge, tear a bit off, use the center of the sponge. And we're just basically just wiping it down from the top of the model to the bottom of the model. And the reason for that is because we're going to be focusing on the top of the miniature because it's the face. You're going to naturally look at the top. You're going to be putting it on the board and looking down at it. So focus removing the streaking grime from the top because that's going to be the lightest point, and the darkest point is going to be underneath, under the cloth, on the base, etc. And again, if you want to, you're literally done. Well done. You just unlocked GrimDark in a bottle. It literally took you 5 minutes to take these miniatures from crap to slap, and that was it. You now have a small force of miniatures that look grimy, and that is half of what we're achieving. It's called Grimy Dark. Surely. Now, if you want to take this further, you can add some highlights just to add a little bit more pop, a little bit more pizzazz. You know, a little bit of what my old art teacher used to say, a little bit of va-va-voom.
More va-va-voom.
I'm not thinking about what I'm using. All I'm doing is adding a little bit of light grey or a little bit of white to the contrast paints that I was using earlier, because it's the same day. This is how fast I've painted them. And I'm just reactivating the contrast with a little bit of paint in there. Sometimes I'm adding a little bit of brown if it's too light. So I'm using one of the other contrasts that I use for like the chest of the mimic, and I'm just adding that brown in there. And I'm just using that to dull down the highlight, and then just picking out the highest points, like the top of this fur cloak or like the cape and stuff like that. Some bits that I kind of want to stand out. You don't have to go crazy at this point. I've kind of already got it in my head that I like the miniatures the way they are. The more highlights I do, the better it's going to look. But it's one of those you can kind of keep putting hours into it, and that's where the time sink really goes. But for me at this point, I'm pretty happy with them. I'm going to pick out some of the bits that have like lost a bit of color, and some of the metallics on the characters are looking worn, but a little bit too worn. So I'm just going to add a few highlights there just for the characters, because they probably keep their weapons in better shape than the hollows that are already dead. And the real star of this section that I'm painted today is the mimic. The mimic's so cool. He hardly ever comes out, but when he does, you want him to be fearsome. And by that, I mean, give him a cool paint job. And also, like, on a lot of the artwork of a mimic, is the arms in the chest are always a lot lighter than the bottom half of the body. And I wanted to create that separation, so I'm adding some lighter highlights to the arms, because they stay inside the chest. Me if I was a mimic. I'm adding some highlights to the arms rather than the bottom of the legs, because that always looks darker and the arms look a lot lighter. And I wanted to add some extra color to the tongue as well, because it was looking a bit... The problem is when you're adding like a brown wash and everything like gets dulled down. So I'm adding some extra color in there, and all I've done is just taken the contrast paint I painted on the tongue earlier and just added some extra pink in there. That's all I've done, just to make the tongue look like a tongue, you know? Again, you can go as far as you like. If you want him to look like he's not brushed his teeth in 5 years, put some yellow down the middle. If you want to look like he's just scrammed a WKD in the middle of a nightclub, put some blue down the middle. Do what you like. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. I've got loads of metallics on these old models, but they're all looking really shiny because I only have silver, so I'm using some rust. What's it called? Rust. What's it called again? Dirty down rust. That's what it's called. This is actually like a paint you can buy now, but it's actually what they use in television to create like a rust effect. So what you do is you kind of warm up the paint, and you also warm up the place that you're applying it. And you apply it in quite a thick layer, and then once it's dry, drying it with a hairdryer, you use like a wet paintbrush to like smudge it out and make it look a little bit more natural, and get like the dark bit and the light bit of it. It looks like rust. I don't know what you want me to say. It's rust in a bottle. I thought he said rust in a bottle, but it doesn't. It's just rust in a bottle. Just make sure you shake it properly. Like, I have agitators in this stuff, and they're stuck to the bottom. You might be able to see they are stuck in the bottom. So make sure you agitate it really well, and make sure you warm it up. If you don't warm it up, it doesn't work. If you don't agitate it very well, all the rust stuff is in the bottom and not in where you want it on your brush. Now I'm adding a little bit to all of the models, more on the enemies than the heroes, because obviously the heroes, again, whilst they are having a crap time in Dark Souls and being forced to link the flame, evil or not, depending what end did you go for, they're probably going to keep their weapons in a little bit better shape than undead. So, but again, you don't have to do any of this. You could literally stop earlier where we finished the streaking grind bit. You can stop there. I'm just adding some more bits to make it look a bit more interesting, because it's actually relatively quick to do, and I do think it makes a big difference, and it makes them go from kind of okay to like, oh my god, wow, how did you do that? It's like, I got a bottle and I warmed it up. As for the base, I just dry brushed that ivory again. I'm literally using the streaking grime to paint the base. I'm not even touching it. It's just the wash from earlier that we've diluted onto the base because we wiped it down earlier with enamel thinner, and now it's gone onto the base. And then I dry brushed it ivory again, just on the edges of the tiles, and then I just painted the edge of the base black. And there we go. There we've got some GrimDark looking miniatures that are pretty cool, and I really like this style. You might notice that I like paint everything different. Like, I enjoy trying out different styles of painting. I do super clean highlight stuff for my main Warhammer army, my Blood Ravens, but then I also like to do like dry brushes and washes for like my fantasy army. But then also sometimes I enjoy trying a little bit of streaking grime, like for instance these Dark Souls miniatures, and also my Iron Hands army that I painted a while ago that me and Georgie did for a video, which is pretty cool. Sometimes it's nice to like have like a super different project, whether that's a completely different game like I'm doing here, or just like maybe just like a different unit just to try out and just paint it slightly differently, something that you've never tried before, and it can make you feel like really revitalized when it comes to painting, because I don't feel like painting this style, but maybe I want to paint it in this style, and then at least we're all attacking that pile of shame. It's not a pile of opportunity, it's a pile of shame. Get it sorted. Stop coping, right? It's called a pile of shame for a reason. You should be ashamed. Deal with it. Sorry, I'm projecting now. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my members who help support the channel and make these videos possible. I couldn't do it without them. And also thank you to Red Deer Games for sponsoring today's video as well. And I'm going to go and shoot some people up in Dakka Squadron. So use my link in the description, and I'll see you in the skies, as I said. What are you still doing here? I'm playing games now. Go away. Subscribe.